Hey guys, Shane here from AMain Hobbies and happy to be back with you with another Tech Talk Tuesday, and today in episode 4 we will be looking at our Nitro vehicles a little bit before we hop back on over to the electric stuff. In the next couple of videos we'll be covering both servos as well as ESCs, how to tune them and those settings and points, what makes certain servos better than others and what makes certain ESCs better than others also. But for today's installment we'll be looking at Nitro engine basics. So basically, where are the 3 screws and how do they work on your engine in order to tune them, as well as understanding your braking and throttle linkage and how to set them up correctly. Right, so first things first, let's go ahead. As you can see over here, I've already removed my clips and my pins, and there goes my body, because of course if we don't remove that we won't be able to get to the engine over there. The first thing that I wanted to show you guys, I brought my old engine over here. As you remember in my old video, I didn't have an engine in, because if you're anything like me, when it comes time for the new year, it's time for some new gear. So here's the engine. I'm going to go ahead and pop that out. This one over here, oh, my little spring is hooking on the side over there. There we go. This one is in fact an RB. It's a BXR motor. This used to be our Team Edition motor. I'm going to put that one side and come back to it in just a second for our demonstration. And over here we can see our ProTech LS5 engine. That's what's going to be going into this one over here, along with a Novarossi short tune pipe. And also, of course, if you want to upgrade your motor, you may as well upgrade your servos as well. As you can see, I've still got the older servo on the throttle over here, which I'll be upgrading very shortly. And over here I've got the new it's the new brushless servo, the new ProTech 170 SBL, which is going to be a lot smoother, a lot more powerful. If you want to know the differences between the servos, that'll be covered not next video, but the video after that one. So that will be Tech Talk installment number 6. I'll be covering servos and what makes them better and how that works. Next will be ESCs. Right, but for today, we're busy trying to understand the Nitro buggy and its linkage. And if you see inside over here, I'm just going to hold the buggy up. You'll see over here, this is what we're referring to as the linkage, which is the bit that operates between your servo. As you can see, your servo over here will turn, and this will cause your linkage to open and close. This will be throttle open position. As you can see, that would open up your carburetor, and as you can see over there, that is throttle close position, and that will activate your brakes over here. Now the big difference between a Nitro buggy and an electric buggy is the fact that a Nitro buggy actually has brakes, and of course we want to be able to use that correctly. So how do we set up our endpoints, etc. correctly so that we can use this with our buggy? Well, let's take a look. Over here on the on the linkage side, the first thing is very important that we set this up correctly. Now I want to show you that in your book, in your manual, it's going to show you a very specific setup procedure for your particular buggy. In my buggy's case, we want to be able to set these 2 rods up to be parallel as seen over here, so that when the horn moves this way, it will in fact pull. That's throttle open, and as it moves back, it will in fact, as you can see over there, if I move it correctly, everything will remain parallel, but your brakes will engage whilst also staying straight. Now why is this so important? Very firstly put, our carburetor only moves in one manner, which is open and closed, forward and back. So that's very important that we move forward and back. So a couple of things that you're going to want to adjust over there. The first thing is going to be your actual linkage itself, which is going to be set over here. You want to put it in the right place, and you want to be able to set these sliders. But the first thing that you want to do is just place your slider in place, put the little rod in place, and go ahead and attach your coupling onto your carburetor. The next thing that you want to check over here is, does your carburetor move open and closed in a straight position? So let me go ahead and just bring this car around this way over here. And you can see if I go ahead and pop my little coupling on over there, oops, you see of course that's working. So you go ahead over there, and as this is working, you need to see that that's opening and closing in a forward manner. If it does not, this is what you need to do. Now most motors have a set screw by which you can adjust the carburetor, and this is the first little trick that I'm going to teach for you today. And you'll see that that screw sits just down in the bottom for this motor over here. You will see that it goes into the casing, and essentially that casing is going to clamp around the nozzle of the carburetor itself, thus clamping the carburetor inside and stopping it from getting free. Now we can move this right over here, which means that we can in fact swivel the entire carburetor. So this part over here can move forwards and backwards. Essentially our carburetors like this, we can move it that way or that way, however we need. And there is also a set screw in the bottom of this over here in this particular belt, allowing us to modify this little housing over here. So there we can also move this downwards, and all the way around you can move this little bobble to be anywhere in that position. That will allow for you to set your linkage up correctly. In our case over here, we needed it to be parallel in order to work correctly. Alright, so we'll be coming back to that in a second. Just one little trick that you'll see over there, a couple of the pros do use this as well, it's just a return elastic, and I also use on my actual linkage over here. You'll see once I plugged it in, I bring this screw up and over here, and then that grabs onto my linkage over there. It's a double system by which my carburetor will be closed should my battery fail, at which point your servos will stay in the exact same position as what they were, thus giving you a vehicle that may run away. If you use these elastics and springs in the correct manner, they'll close your carburetor. Thus, when your battery fails, that servo won't stay wide open. It'll close the carb, and at least your car won't run away screaming off into the distance and maybe hurt somebody. So that's the first thing about your throttle linkage. The second thing about your throttle linkage is that it is also your braking linkage, as you know in this particular case. And what we need to do in this case over here is adjust our braking linkage. And how you do that, you're going to go ahead and grab your transmitter, turn your transmitter in your car on, go ahead and set your endpoints. Now the first thing that you want to set is you want to make sure that when the servo is in neutral position, that all 4 of your wheels are able to move freely without any obstruction. You can see that mine's doing that very clearly. As the brakes begin to start getting adjusted, you'll see that pressure will start to form against the actual brake pads over here. They work just the same. The brake pads close up on the disc which sits around your differential, holding it tight, thus not allowing the dog bones to turn over. And you'll start to see over here now we're starting to get quite a lot more resistance. How you want to set this up is when you are on full brakes, depending on how you want your brake bias to be, you want your wheels to almost be locking up in the front and just rolling slightly forward. In most cases, most gentlemen like to have theirs locking up completely in the back. You can see mine's quite a lot more resistance than the front. Of course, my brake is not on very hard over here. Let me apply a little bit more brake. You can start to see now we can see a little bit of rolling over there. Let me go ahead and see that will be completely locked up at the back. That's just my preference on the brakes. I prefer about 60 brakes in the front and about 40 brakes in the back. And very simply put, if you want to adjust your braking linkage over here, will be your little tabs, and you can see over there very clearly put how they adjust. If you want this in order to go a little bit tighter, you would put that a little bit closer to the stick itself over here, to your brake, what would they call that? They would call that your brake cam, because that's going to activate this brake over here. This one, as you can see, will be for the rear brake. And in the bottom over here, this one over here will be for the front brake. So if you want to adjust that, all you've got to do is basically adjust this little metal set screw to be inwards, to be tighter, or outwards to be looser in this case, as that's the way in which our brakes are being pulled. So there we go, we can see our throttle linkage over here, as we can see with our carburetor, and our brake linkage of course as well. And one little trick for you, just to let you know, when you do set your servos up, and I'll often do this, you want to make sure that when you put your radio tray and when you put your servos in and that sort of thing, that your servos are all in the straight forward position. Because of course, what if I set my servo right now and my linkage was supposed to be straight like this, and I set it all up like that, and I turned it on for the first time, the servo sent it off to the side. Now of course, number one, we may break something. Number two, the car's not going to drive very well. So what you want to do is, in my particular case, I've set a fail-safe on my servo. So my throttle servo, when I turn it on or off, will go to the 0 position anyway. There we go. The beeping that you're hearing is this servo in the front over here, so I'm just going to get rid of that, because that is a digital servo, so it actually needs to receive some sort of an input from the receiver to tell it what 0 is. So that being said, that one was just beeping over there. But you can see I already put the fail-safe on this one. That's one of the reasons why I like the servo so much, is that it will actually center itself upon receiving voltage, regardless of the actual signal input over there. So now we know my brake linkage is straight. Now we know that my throttle linkage is straight as well. We're ready now to look at our throttle, our steering in the front over here as well. And for this, I'm going to be breaking out my transmitter, so let me get that for you. And I'm going to be using the Spectrum DX4S, which is the transmitter that I have chosen quite a while ago. Alright. And let's go ahead and turn that on. Select the correct model, which I am on. And let's go ahead and let's just show you what that does. So that beep that you heard was the servo initializing, and you'll see over here now our servo has now set itself to the straight position. You can see I can now begin to apply force, and the servo is now at work. Okay, so there is a bit of slop in my car, as you can see, which probably needs to be tended to, but this being said, the servo is doing its job. The steering servo is doing its job as well. Now I have already set my endpoints, so this is just for the purpose of this video. I'm going to go ahead and turn all the way to the left and all the way to the right. And as you can see over there, I've set my endpoints to be right there, literally at the 100% endpoint of the travel motion of the wheel. Now, some people may want to set it a little bit less. They may want to set it just there. Some people may want to set it a little bit more. You know, they may want to have a full turn of the steering wheel, meaning that it's going to go all the way over. And also apply some force to the actual structure. You don't want that, and I'll tell you why. Is when the servo starts to apply that force to your structure, it's going to start breaking points like bending hinge pins, possibly damaging shock shafts, maybe bending arms, rounding out your inserts, which are sitting over here in the front of the vehicle, and so on and so on. So it's very important that when you set your servo, that it only go almost to the endpoint right over there, as you can see, and almost to the endpoint, as you can see over there. So how we do that is in our transmitter, we're going to go ahead and select what is called travel. Yours may be called, you may have a couple of other mentions over there. Mine is called travel, and as you can see over here, I've set, so let's go for instance, all the way over to the right. I think this time now, looking at it a second time, maybe I've gone a little bit too far to the right. You can see how that's actually really where I would want it to be, and that's where it's going to. So let's go ahead and adjust that to a downward position. So I'm just going to adjust downward, and if you look at that wheel, it's going to start moving in just a second. There you can see it start to move. And this right now will then be 100%. So that's of course not enough, so we need to bring it upwards. And so on you go. Now you want to set your servo endpoints are always going to be a little bit different per servo. Number one, per receiver, they're going to be different, so make sure that you do go ahead and set those. And how you'll know if you've actually put too much, and I've put too much in the last time, just have a look at this and listen to my servo. There's no strain on the servo. Did you hear that? And you can hear the servo is actually working to hold it in that position, which actually means it's on too much. So let me go ahead and turn that down somewhat. There we go, and now we can hear the servo is no longer doing that. So in fact, I was too far over on my servo travel, and now I am at the correct place. Alright, so there we go. Now we can save those positions, and now my servos are ready to go. Okay, so throttle, servo, and linkage, steering servo is now set, throttle linkage is set, brake linkage is set. How on earth do we set our travel for the, wouldn't it quite honestly just be throttle all the way open and throttle all the way closed? It's a little bit more difficult than that, and I want to show that to you today. I'm going to break open this brand new engine over here. Let's open this up, and I hope it's not all inside of a box or something. We'll find out in just a second. This will be an unboxing that I haven't seen this motor yet. Okay, the carburetor is on there and it is sealed, so I may not be able to show you guys, but we'll see in just a second. Okay, I wonder if you can see. You can very briefly see. Okay, I'm going to describe it to you because okay. Alright, there we go. I've just gone ahead and pulled off the air filter over there, which is exactly what I wanted to show you on this motor over here. And what I wanted to show you is the inside of the carburetor, because that's going to be a very important part of you setting your linkage correctly for your throttle. And as you can see in this case over here, our throttle is set as so. I'm going to go ahead and just pop the motor in. Of course, our motor is not mounted, so the adjustments may not be identical as what I'd like for you to see. But let me bring the motor over here, because this is going to be the important bit over here, is inside of the carburetor. You'll see that there is a little slide, and I hope you guys can see it in there. And if you slide this backwards, you'll see, of course, that opens up your carburetor. And if you let that close, that, of course, closes your carburetor. Now, your carburetor is actually going to be round, completely round. But on the tip, let's imagine if we turn that sideways, it's going to be flat over here, but on this part, there's actually a little elliptical sections. And as that, imagine that elliptical section now being like this, as your round circumference of your carburetor looks, your little slide will look like that, and it will open up until it reaches a 100 maximum full, and then of course at that point that should be your 100% throttle, and then it will close up again. Now you want to be sure not to close your throttle linkage past this point, because of course no fuel going into the car will mean that it will die. And of course you also want to make sure, so it's got that little 2mm, and you also want to make sure on the other side, when you go all the way out where it's supposed to be perfectly round, you never want to go too much far past that perfectly full section. And the reason why you do that is, number one, so that you get full amount of throttle travel. Number two, so that you never overextend your carb, because if you pull your carb too hard, you can pull it right out. And number three, so that you don't starve the vehicle off when you're closing the carburetor. So again, my spring is getting in the way. So again, what you want to do is make sure that when your throttle is closed like so, that your carburetor is showing just a little bit. And if you can see inside over there, there's just a little bit of play. Now it should be like that, otherwise your carburetor has a bit of a problem. And as you're going to go over here, you'll see that that is now 100% fully open. But you'll notice my carburetor still has just a little bit of play. There's actually still quite a lot of play in mine. So that's good. And that's what's going to save your carburetor, because if you pull your carburetor all the way open to 100%, but the one day your servo doesn't sense it properly and pulls it that little bit extra, you always need to have that little bit of extra there so you don't bend or break your carb. So that's going to be a very, very, very important bit of motor tuning and making sure that you get the right linkage here done correctly for your travel on your throttle channel with your servo. Alright, cool. So now we've got the electronics in, you've got your battery charged with the little zapper that I showed you, you've got your servo set up, you've got your fuel in, you're ready to go. And now you're going to go down to the track and it's going to be your first time running a Nitro buggy or truggy, first time running a Nitro engine. So let's have a look over here. Let me get this car out of the way. Let's have a look at the couple of screws that you'll be working on. There'll be 3 screws which you'll be looking at. One will be what they call your idle screw. The next will be what they call your low end screw, and the next will be what they call your top end screw. Now each one does something a little bit different. Of course, your idle screw, which on this particular motor is registered on this side just over here. The idle is literally going to change the amount of fuel that the car receives at idle, so you can change that. The low end is going to give you what at low revolutions is the fuel mix, and the high end is going to give you what is at high revolutions your fuel mix. Now of course there is a slightly different mix that you may want on a cold day to a hot day, etc., with regards to your low end and your high end, and that's why it's important that you know exactly which screw that you're tuning. So let's have a look at this particular motor over here, and I'm going to show you where all of the screws are situated and how to recognize them. Firstly and foremost, all of your screws most likely will be on your carburetor. None will be on the engine casing itself. The only screw in fact that you will see on the engine casing will be this one over here, and this one is so that we can adjust our carburetor as I mentioned previously, so please do ignore that screw. Your 3 other screws would most likely look like this one just over here, and as you can see over there, there is my idle screw. And please do excuse this is a very dirty motor. As you can tell, I've just bought some new kit to upgrade and change over there. And over here you can see that is going to be my low end screw, and on the top end over here, on the other end over here, this is going to be my high end screw. Now I want to make a note, guys, that firstly you've got to know which screw you're tuning, and secondly I want to make sure that when you guys wrench these screws, we're not putting screws into a wooden board or anything like that. We're just adjusting the screws very, very, very slightly, and you always want to adjust very slightly in one manner and then try and see what that does for you first, do a bit of testing, and then come back to the drawing board and see how it goes. And why this is so important is most motors are going to be very close to a tune that they can run at, but they're not going to be tuned yet for performance, because your air density, your altitude, the humidity in the air, the fuel that you run, all of that sort of thing is going to be very different to the factory of where they made the motor, so you've got to know what you're doing. So that being said, your idle is the first screw that you want to look at over there, and what you want to do is you go ahead and fire up your motor by putting in your glow igniter, put it on the bump box like I have my car, start your motor up, and once the motor's idling, you can see a couple of things. One, is the motor idling? If the motor is dying out at this point, what you may want to do is you may want to go richer, or you may want to go leaner on your motor. Now just to let you know what each one of those means. Richer means more fuel, so more fuel would mean that you want to tap the screw out, right? Because you want the screw to come out of the compartment in order to let more fuel through. So if you want to go richer, you tap the screw out. If you want to go leaner, thus get more air and less fuel, you want to tap the screw in. So righty tighty, lefty loosey. Just remember that one in case you need it, guys. I know it sounds very basic, but when you're doing all this stuff, the basics are the most important bit to get over to the advanced. So make sure that you pay attention to these basics. So righty tighty, lefty loosey. So let's say your car's flaming up. Maybe it's because you don't have enough fuel going through, right? Well, let's rich it up. Let's say if we rich it up and the car still doesn't start, well, maybe there was too much fuel. Well, let's lean it out to where it was, and let's lean it back just a little bit again. Now, any motion of these two actions could have been correct. There's no way of telling without testing the motor one way or another, and it's going to be the same for the low end screw, and it's going to be the same for the high end screw as well. So when you do tune, guys, what you want to do is you want to tune it by 1 hour, and imagine here is a watch in front of you with 12 being over here, and with 3 being on this side, 6 being at the bottom, and 9 being on this side over here, that being 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. You change the watch time by 1 hour on the hour hand. So from a 12 o'clock to an 11 o'clock, or from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, only by 1 hour. Such a tiny little increment is going to make such a big difference in this engine. Again, tightening the screw in, i.e. going to the right hand side for you guys, is going to be less fuel, and letting the screw out, which is going to be a left hand side for you guys, is going to be a little bit more fuel, so it's going to allow more fuel into the engine. So just pay attention there. The first screw that you're going to want to start with, you're going to want to start with your idle screw, and you're going to want to get your car to a good idle. Just to let you know, 2 screws that really play into each other's hands is the idle screw and the low end screw. Now the low end screw is the amount of fuel that you receive at the low end very close to your idle, and the idle screw essentially alters the fuel mix at which you are idling. So this being said, if you lean out your idle screw, you almost certainly would want to go on your low end screw and just fatten that up a little bit to make sure that it gets the right mix when it starts going on its journey and starts moving forward. So that's just a general rule of thumb that most people will do. If you're going to lean out the idle by 1 hour, you're going to fatten up your bottom end, and vice versa. Now on the top end, there's no rule of thumb like that, but a lot of the time where you're going to adjust your low end, you're also going to want to adjust your high end. And what you want to tune first is you want to go from the idle, tune that first, over to your low end, tune that next, over to your high end, tune that next. And the reason why you do it in that order is, of course, the idle affects your low end, which affects your high end. So you want to make sure that the low end is tuned first before you get to the high end. Now to tune your motor, you're going to need the help possibly of a professional, or possibly of somebody that knows it a little bit better, because the first time that you hear the motor, almost anything's going to sound good to you. Just so long as it's running, it's probably going to sound good to you. This being said, you do need the ear of a professional, and it's the ear that you want, and also the eyes maybe too, to see the smoke, because it's really the sound of the motor that's going to tell you whether or not your motor's in a good tune or not. And a good tuned motor will have a good smooth power band all the way through. It will never sound like it's struggling or being throttled or choked, and will sound like it's nice and lean, almost like it's inside of a very, very, very hollow, almost like somebody speaking inside of a bathroom. When you hear the ping coming from the exhaust, it'll have a bit of a resonant feeling to it. There won't be any sort of dull feeling to it either, and that'll be a very good lean tune. And most people will say, and I don't know if I subscribe to this or not, but they say, if in doubt, lean it out. And they say that because in most cases, most people run their motors pretty fat, and by leaning it out, you'll get combustion. But by not leaning it out, you wouldn't get combustion. So try that, guys. Lean it out. If in doubt, lean it out. Give it a go. But what I can tell you is you do not want to run your motor too lean. Keep in mind, guys, this is a 2-stroke motor, and in a 2-stroke motor, lubrication is achieved through the fuel itself. So by running your engine too lean, you will get really good run time, you'll get very good performance, but you'll get a short-term gain thereof, because the fuel as it goes through is also the lubricant. So by running too lean, you're running very hot, you're running with very little lubrication, and you can see where the issues might come from there. Heat and no lubrication in the motor is never ever a good thing. So make sure, guys, that you find a good tune, and if you need a bit of help, I hope that this video helped you out today. This has been Nitro Throttle Linkage as well as Nitro Engine Basics. And in the next couple of videos, we're going to be doing ESC tuning and linkage. We're also going to be doing servos in the next videos. So do post down below what you guys would like to see. Like, comment, share. I try my best to get back to every single comment that you guys do make personally. And I have a couple of colleagues that help me out too. So if you do get an answer back, or you'd like some more information, just shoot us a message. We're happy to help you out. Also, if you're in the USA, that'll be perfect. Oh, there we go, my transmitter. If you're in the USA, don't forget to like, share, comment down below as well. The phone lines are open for you guys, 1-800-705-2215, and of course chat and email as well on any one of the subjects that we've spoken about, or anything else that you'd like to see, guys, for all of your hobby needs from the RC world. AMain Hobbies here with Shane today for Tech Talk Tuesday, episode number 4. You guys have a great day. We'll catch you next time.